A loyal military canine was betrayed and left to die, bound with duct tape to an abandoned ranger station deep in the wilderness. What this dedicated forest ranger discovered on her patrol route shattered her heart and changed her life forever. The secret hidden in the dog's collar would unravel a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. If you're about to hear this story, prepare for a journey of courage, loyalty, and second chances that will leave you believing in the power of unconditional love. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Rain pounded against the windows of the Eastern Ridge Ranger Station as Sierra Blackwood reviewed the weather reports for the 5th time that morning. Flash flood warnings flashed red across her computer screen, and the wind howled through the ancient pines surrounding the small outpost. It was the kind of storm that kept most people indoors, but for Sierra, it meant her day was just beginning. "You sure you want to go out in this?" Jake Peterson, her station supervisor, leaned against the doorframe of her office, concern etched across his weathered face. "The North Ridge Trail is probably washed out by now." Sierra zipped up her Forest Service jacket and grabbed her pack. "Someone needs to check the conditions at the old Westbrook station. If that roof caves in, after all the restoration work we did last summer, the department will have my head." Jake nodded, knowing better than to argue. At 34, Sierra Blackwood was the most experienced ranger on his team, dedicated, meticulous, and stubborn as the ancient redwoods she'd spent her career protecting. Her decade of service in the Cascade Mountain Wilderness area had earned her both respect and a certain reputation for putting the forest's needs above her own comfort. "Take the radio," Jake said, handing her the waterproof device. "Cell service will be non-existent in this weather." Sierra clipped it to her belt and offered a half smile. "I'll be back before dark. Don't send the cavalry unless you haven't heard from me by sunset." The storm hit her full force as she stepped outside, the rain immediately soaking through her supposedly waterproof pants. Sierra squinted against the downpour and made her way to her Forest Service truck, an aging forest green Ford that had seen better days but never failed her when it mattered. As she navigated the winding forest road, Sierra's thoughts drifted to the notification she'd received that morning. Budget cuts were coming again. 3 ranger positions would be eliminated. Across the district, and with the new administration's focus on resource optimization rather than conservation, Sierra wondered if her 13 years of experience would be enough to secure her position. The thought of leaving these mountains sent a ripple of anxiety through her chest. This forest had become her sanctuary after 2 tours in Afghanistan, left her with scars both visible and hidden. The quiet majesty of the ancient trees, the predictable challenges of the changing seasons, and the simple purpose of protecting this wilderness had healed her in ways therapy never could. Sierra's hands tightened on the steering wheel as the truck bounced through a deep puddle. She didn't have a backup plan. She'd poured everything into this career, sacrificing relationships, turning down promotions that would have taken her to offices in the city, even passing on having a family. The forest had become her home, its rhythms more familiar than any human connection. The road narrowed as she approached the turnoff to the old Westbrook station, rarely used since the new facilities had been built 5 years ago. This part of the service road was overgrown and rarely maintained. Sierra shifted into 4-wheel drive as the truck crawled forward, branches scraping against the windows like desperate fingers. A fallen tree blocked the final quarter-mile, forcing Sierra to continue on foot. Slinging her heavy pack over her shoulder, she ducked under branches and stepped over roots, the rain still hammering relentlessly against her hood. By the time the old station came into view, her boots were full of water and her socks squished with each step. The Westbrook station had once been the primary ranger outpost for this section of the wilderness, a sturdy log structure built in the 1950s. Now it stood as a historic reminder of the Forest Service's long presence in these mountains, occasionally used for storage or emergency shelter during wildfire season. Sierra approached the building, noting with relief that the roof appeared intact despite the storm's fury. She circled toward the back to check the condition of the generator shed when something unusual caught her eye: fresh tire tracks in the mud, partially filled with rainwater but clearly made within the past day or two. Frowning, Sierra followed the tracks. This station was officially closed, and no maintenance work had been scheduled. The tracks led toward an old storage building about 50 yards from the main station, little more than a glorified shed with cinderblock walls and a metal roof. As she approached, Sierra noticed something else out of place. The padlock on the door hung open, the hasp clearly cut with bolt cutters. She hesitated, years of training and military experience sending warning signals through her body. She unclipped the radio from her belt. "Base, this is Blackwood," she said, keeping her voice low. "I'm at the Westbrook station. Signs of unauthorized entry at the storage building, requesting guidance." Static crackled back at her. She tried again with the same result. The storm was interfering with the transmission, leaving her alone with her decision. Standard protocol would be to retreat, report, and return with law enforcement. But the freshness of the tracks suggested whoever had broken in might still be inside, potentially destroying evidence. And if they were engaged in illegal activity, drug production or poaching, both increasingly common problems in the national forest, they might return before reinforcements could arrive. Sierra reached into her pack and withdrew her service pistol. Though rarely needed in her daily duties, her military background had made her one of the few rangers authorized to carry a firearm regularly. She approached the door cautiously, listening for any sounds from within. Nothing but the steady drumming of rain on the metal roof. With practiced efficiency, Sierra positioned herself beside the door, turned the handle slowly, and pushed it. Open in one smooth motion, entering in a low stance, with her weapon ready. The stench hit her first. Urine, feces, and something else. A sharp metallic smell she recognized from her military days. Blood. The interior was dark, thin slivers of daylight penetrating through small windows near the ceiling. As her eyes adjusted, Sierra made out the shapes of old equipment, fire tools, spare parts for vehicles, stacks of sandbags for flood control. Then she heard it, a low, barely audible whimper from the back corner. Sierra reached for her flashlight, keeping her weapon trained on the sound. The beam cut through the darkness, landing first on a mess of tape on the floor, silver duct tape torn and shredded. She followed the debris to its source and felt her blood turn to ice. A dog, a large Belgian Malinois, was slumped against the back wall. Its body was emaciated, ribs clearly visible through its dull coat. Patches of blood matted its fur where rings of duct tape had bound it so tightly they cut into flesh. Though someone had clearly attempted to completely immobilize the animal, it had somehow managed to partially free itself, though it remained bound to a support beam by its hindquarters. Sierra holstered her weapon immediately. "Hey there," she called softly, approaching slowly with her hand extended, palm down. The dog lifted its head weakly, amber eyes reflecting the flashlight beam. A low growl rumbled from its throat, but there was no energy behind the warning. "It's okay," Sierra continued, her voice calm, despite the rage building inside her at whoever had done this. "I'm not going to hurt you." As she drew closer, Sierra noticed something around the dog's neck, not a typical collar, but a military-style tactical harness, partially obscured by matted fur and dried blood. Recognition hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't just any dog. This was a military working dog, the kind she'd worked alongside during her tours overseas. These dogs were elite soldiers, trained for detection, protection, and combat support. They were also treated as valuable assets and respected team members. The idea that someone would abandon one like this, left to die in such a cruel manner, was unfathomable. The dog watched her approach, its eyes showing a complexity of emotions Sierra recognized: wariness, pain, but also a desperate hope. She knelt about 5 feet away, giving the animal space. "I was a handler too," she said softly. "Not K9 unit, but I worked with your colleagues in Afghanistan. You're safe now." As if understanding her words, the dog's posture shifted slightly, the growl fading to a whimper. Sierra moved closer, inch by careful inch, talking continuously in a low, soothing voice. When she was within reach, she slowly extended her hand, allowing the dog to sniff her. After a moment's hesitation, the Malinois stretched its neck forward just enough for Sierra's fingers to brush against its head. The simple gesture of trust nearly broke her heart. "Let's get you out of here," she murmured, examining the duct, tape still binding the dog's hindquarters to the beam. It was wrapped in multiple layers, cruelly tight. The fact that the dog had managed to free its front half spoke to both its strength and desperation. Sierra retrieved her multi-tool from her belt and began carefully cutting through the layers of tape, taking care not to nick the already injured skin beneath. As she worked, she continued talking, both to keep the dog calm and to control her own growing fury. "Who did this to you, huh? You're a military dog. You've served people, protected them. You deserved better than this." The dog watched her work with unwavering attention, its breathing shallow but steady. When the last of the tape finally gave way, the animal slumped to the ground, too weak to stand. Sierra examined it more thoroughly now, running professional, hands over its body to assess the injuries. The dog was severely dehydrated and malnourished, with abrasions around its neck, midsection, and legs where the tape had cut into the skin. How long had it been here? Days, at least, based on its condition. "You need water," Sierra said, reaching for her canteen. She poured a small amount into her cupped hand and offered it to the dog, who lapped at it desperately. She allowed small amounts at a time, knowing that too much at once could be dangerous in the dog's condition. As she provided water, Sierra's fingers brushed against something metallic, partially hidden in the dog's tactical harness. She gently parted the fur to reveal a set of military identification tags, similar to human dog tags. Through the grime, she could make out a name, Phantom, and an identification number. "Phantom," she said aloud. The dog's ears twitched at the sound, confirming this was indeed his name. "What happened to you, Phantom? Where's your handler?" As if in response, Phantom made a small movement, trying to reposition himself. The shift caused something to catch the light, a small weatherproof pouch sewn into the inside of his harness. Sierra hadn't noticed it during her initial examination. Curious, she carefully opened the hidden pocket and extracted a small object, a USB drive sealed in a waterproof case. She turned it over in her palm, questions multiplying in her mind. Why would a military working dog be carrying digital data? And why would someone try to eliminate the dog in such a cruel manner rather than simply taking the drive? Something about this felt dangerous, far beyond the usual problems she encountered in the forest. Sierra tucked the drive securely into her pocket. Decision made. First, she needed to get Phantom to safety and medical care. Then she could figure out what the USB drive contained and why someone had been willing to let a valuable military dog die to prevent its delivery. Sierra radioed the base again, relieved when this time the storm had abated enough for her transmission to get through. "Base, this is Blackwood. I need immediate assistance at the Westbrook station. I found an injured military working dog, a Belgian Malinois, appears to have been bound and abandoned. Severe dehydration and injuries from restraint. Need veterinary support and transport." Jake's voice crackled back, concern evident. "Copy that. Vet's at least 2 hours out in this weather. Can you transport?" Sierra looked at Phantom, who had closed his eyes but maintained a tense vigilance. He was too weak to walk the quarter-mile back to her truck and too heavy for her to carry easily over the rough terrain. Negative on immediate transport. Dog is approximately 70 pounds weakened condition. I'll need assistance or equipment. Roger that. I'll send Martinez with the game carrier, ETA 40 minutes. In the meantime, Forest Service is checking for reports of missing military dogs. Nothing immediately coming up in the system. That didn't surprise Sierra. If someone had gone to such lengths to dispose of Phantom, they weren't likely to report him missing. Copy. I'll establish shelter and begin basic first aid. Blackwood out. Sierra turned her attention back to Phantom. The immediate priorities were clear: hydration, warmth, and basic wound care. She emptied her pack, laying out the emergency thermal blanket, first aid kit, and remaining water. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "All right, boy, we need to get you warmed up," she said, carefully wrapping the reflective blanket around his trembling body. She continued offering small amounts of water, which Phantom accepted eagerly. From her first aid kit, she extracted antiseptic wipes and began cleaning the worst of the wounds where the tape had cut into his skin. Phantom flinched, but didn't growl or snap, his intelligent eyes watching her every move with a growing trust that made her throat tight with emotion. As she worked, Sierra found herself talking to Phantom as she would to a human partner. "You've been through something terrible, haven't you? But you're a soldier. You're trained to survive." She gently cleaned a particularly nasty abrasion on his hind leg. "And you've done your job. You protected whatever's on this drive. Now it's my turn to protect you." Thunder rolled across the mountains, but the rain had begun to ease. Sierra checked her watch. Martinez wouldn't arrive for at least half an hour. She needed to get Phantom to the main station building, where there was better shelter, and she could build a fire to warm him properly. She turned to her pack, retrieving an emergency tarp that could serve as a makeshift stretcher. "This won't be comfortable," she told Phantom, "but we need to move you somewhere better." Working carefully, Sierra positioned the tarp beside the dog and gently rolled him onto it. Phantom whimpered but cooperated, seeming to understand her intentions. Using the corners of the tarp, Sierra created a drag sled and began the laborious process of pulling the large dog across the uneven ground toward the main station. The effort left her breathless and sweating despite the cool rain. Military training had given her significant strength, but 70 pounds of dead weight over rough terrain was challenging for anyone. By the time they reached the porch of the old station, Sierra's arms burned with exertion. The door was locked, but Sierra knew where the emergency key was hidden beneath a loose board on the porch. Inside, the station was musty from disuse but dry and intact. She dragged Phantom to the central room where a stone fireplace dominated one wall. "Let's get you properly warm," she murmured, quickly gathering kindling and logs from the covered box beside the hearth. Within minutes, she had a small fire crackling, casting dancing shadows around the room. Sierra positioned Phantom near enough to the fire to benefit from its warmth without overheating him. She found an old wool blanket in a storage chest and replaced the emergency thermal blanket, creating a more comfortable bed for the injured dog. With Phantom settled, Sierra took a moment to examine the USB drive more carefully. The case was military-grade, designed to withstand extreme conditions. Whatever information it contained, someone had gone to great lengths to ensure it would survive, and then equal lengths to ensure it would never be delivered. The drive itself offered no clues to its contents, no markings, no labels, just a standard black USB stick in a waterproof case. Sierra weighed it in her palm, considering. Protocol would dictate turning it over to her superiors immediately. But something about this situation felt wrong, dangerous, in ways that went beyond her usual responsibilities. A soft whine drew her attention back to Phantom. The dog was watching her, his eyes somehow conveying an urgency she couldn't ignore. He had protected this drive with his life. He had suffered to ensure its delivery, and now he was entrusting it, and himself, to her care. "I won't let you down," she promised, tucking the drive securely back into her inner pocket. "Whatever this is, we'll figure it out together." Sierra returned to Phantom's side, checking his condition. The warmth from the fire seemed to be helping, some of the tension easing from his powerful body. She offered more water, which he now drank with less desperate urgency. As she stroked his head, Sierra noticed something unusual. A small scar behind his left ear, partially hidden by fur. It wasn't a typical injury scar, but appeared to be surgical in nature, a precise incision that had been professionally closed. Military working dogs sometimes received implants, microchips for identification or tracking devices, but this seemed different, more extensive. Sierra was pondering this discovery when her radio crackled. "Blackwood, this is Martinez. I'm at the road blockage, proceeding on foot with the carrier. ETA 15 minutes. "Copy that, Martinez," Sierra responded. "We're in the main building. Fire's going." She turned back to Phantom. "Help is coming, boy. We're going to get you proper medical care." Phantom's tail thumped once against the blanket, weak but unmistakably a positive response. Despite his dire condition, there was a resilience to this dog that struck Sierra deeply. She recognized it because she saw it in herself, in other veterans. The ability to endure, to keep fighting when surrender would be easier. "You're not just any military dog, are you?" She mused aloud, her fingers gently examining the unusual scar. "You're special ops, the harness, the hidden drive, this implant. You're carrying something important." Phantom's eyes never left her face, a deep intelligence evident in his gaze. Sierra had worked with military canines during her tours, but this level of awareness, of apparent understanding, was exceptional even by those standards. A sudden noise outside made Phantom tense, a low growl building in his throat despite his weakened state. Sierra instantly went on alert, moving to the window with practiced caution. Through the rain-streaked glass, she could make out a figure approaching, but it wasn't Martinez with the carrier. A man in dark clothing, definitely not Forest Service, was carefully making his way toward the station. He moved with military precision, checking angles, maintaining awareness of his surroundings. Sierra's combat instincts flared. This was not a lost hiker or a poacher. She stepped away from the window, quickly assessing options. Martinez would arrive soon, but not soon enough. Whoever this was, their presence couldn't be coincidence. They were looking for something, or someone. Sierra glanced at Phantom, who was now fully alert despite his injuries, ears forward, watching her for signals. The connection between them crystallized in that moment. Handler and K9 united by training and purpose. "Stay," she whispered, drawing her service weapon and moving toward the door. The quiet approach of the intruder told Sierra everything she needed to know. This wasn't an innocent visitor seeking shelter from the storm. This was someone who didn't want to be detected, someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. And Sierra was absolutely certain it was connected to the USB drive in her pocket and the loyal K9 who had nearly died protecting it. "Base, this is Blackwood," she whispered into her radio. "Potential hostile approaching Westbrook Station. Request immediate backup. Martinez, hold position." Static answered her. The storm was interfering again, or perhaps someone was jamming the signal. Either way, Sierra was on her own, with an injured military dog to protect an unknown, but clearly valuable information in her possession. She positioned herself beside the door, weapon ready, mind racing through tactical options. Whoever was out there had likely been responsible for Phantom's condition. The rage she had suppressed while caring for the injured dog now sharpened into cold focus. She would protect Phantom and the information he had suffered to deliver, whatever it took. The footsteps on the porch were nearly silent, professional, practiced. Sierra steadied her breathing, falling back on years of military training. The door handle turned slowly, the hinges creaking as it began to open. Sierra braced herself, finger resting lightly on the trigger. Behind her, despite his injuries, Phantom had risen to a crouch, his training overriding his weakness, ready to defend his new handler with whatever strength he had left. The door swung open, and the confrontation that would change both their lives forever began. Sierra held her position beside the door as it swung open, her service weapon steady in trained hands. The figure that stepped inside moved with the calculated precision she recognized from her military days. Weight balanced, hands positioned for quick response, eyes immediately scanning for threats. He was tall, dressed in dark tactical clothing with no identifying insignia, his face weathered and expressionless. The moment he registered Sierra's presence, his hand moved toward his waistband. "Forest Service! Hands where I can see them!" Sierra commanded, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone who had given life-or-death orders before. The man froze momentarily, clearly reassessing the situation. His eyes flicked from Sierra to Phantom, who had managed to rise to a defensive position despite his weakened state, teeth bared in a silent snarl. "Easy, Ranger," the man said, his voice controlled, hands raising slightly but not fully surrendering. "There's been a misunderstanding." "Identify yourself," Sierra demanded, not lowering her weapon. "Department of Defense," he replied smoothly. "I'm here to recover stolen government property." He moved one hand slowly toward his pocket. "I can show identification." "Keep your hands visible," Sierra countered. Something about his demeanor set off warning signals in her mind. His posture was too relaxed for someone with a weapon pointed at him, his confidence too complete. "What government property are you looking for?" His eyes moved to Phantom. "The dog. Military asset, reported missing 3 days ago. I've been sent to retrieve him." Sierra's grip tightened on her weapon. "Interesting approach to retrieval. I found him duct-taped to a pole, left to die. That's standard DoD procedure for handling valuable assets?" A flicker of something, annoyance perhaps, crossed the man's face. "The dog is dangerous. Special containment measures were necessary when he became unpredictable. Now I need to complete my mission and return him to his unit. He has a name," Sierra said. "Phantom. And he wasn't contained. He was tortured and left to die." The man's expression hardened. "You're interfering with a classified operation, Ranger. This isn't Forest Service business." "Animal cruelty on federal land is absolutely my business," Sierra replied. "So is suspicious activity at a closed facility. Your identification slowly." The man reached toward his pocket with deliberate movements. "The dog is part of a specialized military program. His behavior became erratic, dangerous. I've been tracking him for days." Sierra watched him carefully, her instincts screaming that something was deeply wrong with his story. Phantom's behavior, despite his injuries and trauma, had been anything but erratic. His responses had been those of a well-trained military canine, not a dangerous, unpredictable animal. The man produced what appeared to be a Department of Defense identification card, holding it up for her inspection. "Special Handler Division, Canine Retrieval Unit. Now lower your weapon, Ranger. This situation is above your pay grade." Sierra didn't lower her gun. The ID looked legitimate at first glance, but something felt off. In her military experience, she'd never heard of a canine retrieval unit. And the condition she'd found Phantom in wasn't the result of containment. It was deliberate cruelty, intended to result in death. If you're here for legitimate retrieval, where's your transport? Medical support? This dog needs immediate veterinary attention. The man's patience visibly thinned. My transport is nearby, and I'm qualified to assess his condition. Now stand down, Ranger, that's an order. You don't give me orders, Sierra replied evenly, and until I verify your credentials with both Forest Service Command and military channels, Phantom stays under my protection. Something shifted in the man's demeanor, a subtle tightening around the eyes, a slight adjustment in his stance that Sierra recognized from combat situations. He was preparing to act. "Last chance to cooperate," he said, his voice dropping lower. Behind her, Phantom growled, the sound vibrating through the room despite his weakened state. The man's eyes flicked to the dog, and in that split second of divided attention, Sierra saw his hand move toward his waistband again. She reacted instantly, closing the distance between them and striking with practiced efficiency. Her left hand caught his descending wrist, while her right maintained control of her weapon. The move was decisive, leveraging his momentum against him, and within seconds she had him face down on the floor, her knee pressing into his back as she secured his arms. "Big mistake," he grunted, as she located and removed a concealed handgun from his waistband. "I think the mistake was yours," Sierra replied, securing his weapon and patting him down for additional threats. She found another smaller pistol in an ankle holster and a tactical knife strapped to his thigh. This man had come heavily armed for a simple retrieval operation. As she removed a set of zip ties from his pocket, his own restraints turned against him, her fingers touched something, else a small device approximately the size of a cell phone. She extracted it carefully, examining the specialized equipment with growing concern. It was a signal jammer, military grade, powerful enough to disrupt radio and possibly cellular communications within a significant radius. "That explains the radio issues," she murmured, securing his wrists behind his back with the zip ties. "Care to explain why a legitimate DoD retrieval specialist needs to jam communications?" The man remained silent, his earlier pretense of cooperation abandoned. Sierra checked the restraints, then stepped back, keeping her weapon trained on him. "Who are you really working for?" His only response was a cold smile. Sierra assessed the situation rapidly. She had an injured military canine, a hostile individual of unknown affiliation but definite training, compromised communications, and a USB drive containing information valuable enough to kill for. And somewhere out in the forest was Martinez, potentially, walking into danger. She needed to re-establish communications and secure both Phantom and the drive. The man on the floor represented a threat, but also a potential source of information. Sierra made her decision. Moving efficiently, she secured the man's ankles with another zip tie, then conducted a more thorough search, retrieving his ID for closer examination. The badge and credentials looked authentic at first glance, but Sierra's military experience had taught her to notice details. The font on the ID card was slightly wrong, the holographic elements not quite matching standard DoD identification. "Impressive forgery," she commented, pocketing the fake credentials, "but I've seen the real thing." The man's expression remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. Frustration or anger, Sierra couldn't be sure. She moved to check on Phantom, who had remained in a protective stance despite his obvious exhaustion. "Stand down, boy," she said softly. "Good work." At her words, Phantom relaxed slightly, though his eyes remained fixed on the restrained intruder. Sierra disabled the signal jammer, hoping to restore communications. She tried her radio again. "Base, this is Blackwood. Do you copy?" After a moment of static, Jake's voice came through. "Blackwood, this is Base. We lost your signal for a while. What's your status?" "I have a situation at Westbrook Station," Sierra replied, carefully measuring her words. She wasn't certain who might be listening. "I've detained an armed individual claiming to be DOD, attempting to take possession of the K9. Credentials appear falsified. I need security backup and still need that veterinary support." "Copy that," Jake responded, sounding tense. "Martinez reported suspicious vehicle on the service road. He's holding position. Security team dispatched. ETA 30 minutes. Veterinary support still en route." "Tell Martinez to maintain distance and observe only," Sierra instructed. "Unknown if suspect has accomplices. I'll secure the station." "Roger that. Be careful, Sierra." Sierra turned her attention back to the restrained man. "Backup's on the way. Want to start talking before they get here, because right now you're looking at multiple federal charges: trespassing on federal land, animal cruelty, carrying falsified government identification, assaulting a federal officer." "Shall I continue?" The man stared at her silently, his eyes calculating. Sierra recognized the look. He was assessing options, probabilities, potential scenarios. She'd worn that same expression in combat situations. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into, Ranger," he finally said, his voice low. "That dog isn't just a military K9. He's carrying information that could compromise national security. People will die if it reaches the wrong hands." Sierra kept her expression neutral, though her pulse quickened. "And that required leaving. Him taped to a pole to die slowly? That's not containment, that's elimination. Whoever you're working for wanted both the dog and whatever he's carrying destroyed." A flicker of surprise crossed the man's face. He hadn't expected her to know about Phantom's hidden cargo. "You found the drive," he stated rather than asked. Sierra didn't confirm or deny, letting her silence prompt him to continue. "Listen carefully," he said, his tone shifting to urgency. "That information is classified at the highest levels. It implicates people with enough power to make you and everyone you care about disappear. You need to hand it over and walk away from this." "Threatening a federal officer now? You're really building quite a case against yourself." Sierra replied evenly. "Here's what I know. A military working dog was brutally restrained and abandoned, carrying information someone was willing to commit multiple felonies to suppress. That doesn't sound like protecting national security. It sounds like covering up a crime." The man's eyes hardened. "You're making assumptions based on limited information. That drive contains sensitive intelligence that could be misinterpreted by civilians. It needs to be returned through proper channels. And those proper channels involve unmarked personnel with falsified credentials and signal jammers," Sierra countered. "No, I don't think so. The proper channels will be here in 30 minutes, and they can sort this out." A subtle change came over the man's face, a resignation that Sierra recognized all too well from interrogations she'd witnessed during her military service. He'd decided to change tactics. "I was following orders," he said, his voice softer now. "The operation went bad. People died who shouldn't have. Phantom was supposed to be extracted with his handler, but only the dog made it out. What he's carrying, it's evidence of an unsanctioned operation, one that certain officials need to contain. I'm just the cleanup crew." Sierra studied him, trying to separate truth from manipulation. "Who's his handler?" "Captain Alex Mercer, Special Forces, specialized in deep cover operations in restricted territories." The man shifted slightly, wincing as the zip ties cut into his wrists. "Mercer went rogue 3 weeks ago, took sensitive information and disappeared. Phantom was dispatched to track and retrieve him. Something went wrong. And Mercer, dead. Suicide when he was cornered. Phantom was recovered at the scene, but escaped during transport. He's been programmed to deliver that drive to a specific location or individual. We've been tracking him since he escaped." The story sounded plausible, but Sierra's instinct still warned her something was off. "Programmed? He's a dog, not a computer." The man's expression changed, something like grudging respect appearing. That's where you're wrong. Phantom is part of the Cerebral Canine Initiative, experimental neural implants that enhance cognitive function and allow for complex command sequences to be embedded. He's as much technology as he is animal at this point. Sierra glanced at Phantom, remembering the unusual surgical scar she'd noticed. The dog watched her with those intelligent eyes, and she couldn't help wondering, how much did he understand? How much was training, and how much was something else? "Let's say I believe you," Sierra said carefully. "That still doesn't explain why he was left to die. An asset that valuable would be recovered, not eliminated." "Orders changed," the man replied simply. "Too many complications, too many witnesses. Clean slate protocol was initiated. I was sent to ensure completion." The cold calculation in his voice sent a chill through Sierra. She'd served long enough to know that shadowy operations existed, that sometimes decisions were made that sacrificed individuals for what someone determined was the greater good. But the deliberate cruelty shown to Phantom crossed a line that no legitimate operation should sanction. "Well, your clean slate protocol failed," Sierra said firmly, "and now you'll answer for it through proper legal channels." The man actually smiled at that, a small expression devoid of humor. "You really believe that, don't you? That the system works, that justice prevails?" He shook his head slightly. "You'll learn." Before Sierra could respond, her radio crackled again. "Blackwood, this is Martinez. I've got movement at your location. 2 individuals approaching from the north side, armed, moving with tactical precision. Not our security team. Please advise." Sierra felt a spike of adrenaline. "Copy that, Martinez. Maintain your position. Do not engage. These are likely hostile." She turned back to her prisoner, who looked unsurprised by this development. "Your backup?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Insurance," he replied. "I wasn't expected to fail." Sierra assessed the situation rapidly. The main station building had limited defensible positions, multiple entry points, and now she had a restrained prisoner to manage, along with an injured K9. The approaching hostiles would have the advantage of numbers and likely superior firepower. She needed to move. "Time to go, Phantom," she said, returning to the injured dog's side. Despite his condition, Phantom rose shakily to his feet, military, training evident in his immediate response to her command. Sierra gathered her essential gear, then addressed her prisoner. "I'm not leaving you here for your friends, but I'm also not releasing you. We're moving together. Try anything, and I'll consider you an active threat. Understood?" The man nodded once, his expression unreadable. Sierra helped him to his feet, keeping her weapon ready. She cut the zip tie, binding his ankles to allow movement, but kept his wrist secured behind his back. "You'll walk ahead of me, direction and pace as instructed." "And the dog?" he asked, eyeing Phantom warily. "He comes with us," Sierra replied. "He seems to have excellent judgment about who to trust." As if understanding her words, Phantom moved to position himself on Sierra's left side, still visibly weak but determined. The loyalty of the injured animal, still performing his duty despite everything he'd endured, struck Sierra deeply. Whatever was on that drive, whatever mission Phantom had been given, he was committed to completing it, even at the cost of his own life. Sierra activated her radio again. "Martinez, target still approaching?" "Affirmative," came the tense reply. "They've reached the storage building, discovered it empty. They're moving toward the main station now, ETA 2 minutes. "Copy that. I'm evacuating through the south exit with the K9 and 1 detained subject. Can you create a diversion on the north side? Nothing that engages directly, just something to draw attention." There was a brief pause. "I can arrange that. Give me 60 seconds. Sierra guided her prisoner toward the rear door of the station. "We're heading into the forest. Dense cover, moving southeast. Any problems with that plan?" The man gave her a measured look. Those men won't stop until they recover the dog and the drive, and they won't be taking prisoners." "Noted," Sierra replied coolly. "But they have to find us first, and this is my forest." She checked Phantom again, concerned about his ability to travel in his weakened condition. The dog met her gaze steadily, as if assuring her of his readiness. His training and spirit were clearly extraordinary. Despite days of torture and deprivation, he remained focused on his mission. In the distance, a sudden crash followed by the sound of breaking glass echoed through the forest. Martinez had created his diversion. "Move!" Sierra ordered, ushering her prisoner through the door and into the rain-soaked wilderness beyond. The forest welcomed them with immediate concealment, dense underbrush, towering pines, and the natural contours of the mountainside, creating a labyrinth that Sierra had spent years learning to navigate. The rain had lessened to a steady drizzle, enough to mask their sounds, but not heavy enough to make travel impossible. Sierra maintained a firm grip on her prisoner while keeping Phantom close on her other side. The dog moved with surprising steadiness given his condition, though she could see the effort each step required. Whatever his training, whatever technology might have been integrated into his biology, he was still flesh and blood, pushed to his limits. "He won't make it far," the prisoner observed, noticing Sierra's concern for Phantom. "He's been without proper nutrition for days, suffering blood loss and exposure. Military canines are exceptional, but they're not invincible." "He's stronger than you think," Sierra countered, though privately she shared the concern. Phantom needed medical attention soon. The question was how to secure it while evading armed pursuers and protecting the information the dog had suffered so much to deliver. They moved deeper into the forest, Sierra deliberately choosing a path that combined cover with sustainable terrain for the weakened dog. She needed to put distance between them and their pursuers while working their way toward potential extraction points where the Forest Service security team could reach them. "Your friends will have trouble tracking us in these conditions," Sierra said, as they navigated around a fallen tree. "Rain washes away tracks. Forest Service gear is designed to blend with the environment, and I know every trail and hidden path in this sector." "They're not tracking footprints," the man replied, his tone matter-of-fact. "Phantom has a subdermal tracker linked to his neural implant, standard for all assets in the program." Sierra's step faltered momentarily. "You're saying they can track him electronically? Within a 2-mile radius under optimal conditions?" "The implant signal is weak by design, security protocol to prevent unauthorized tracking, but they have the receiver calibrated to his specific frequency. This changed everything. If they could be tracked regardless of their evasion techniques, creating distance wouldn't be enough. They needed to either disable the tracker or find a way to block its signal." "Where exactly is this tracker?" Sierra asked, examining Phantom as they continued moving. "Base of the skull, integrated with the neural implant." The man gestured. With his chin toward the surgical scar Sierra had noticed earlier. "Can't be removed without specialized equipment. It's fused with his central nervous system." Sierra processed this information quickly, but it can be blocked. A hint of grudging respect crossed the man's face. "Theoretically, dense enough material, certain types of electronic interference, but you'd need specialized equipment. Or natural barriers," Sierra murmured, her mind racing through the topographical features of the wilderness area, like a cave system with high mineral content. The prisoner's expression confirmed her theory before he could mask his reaction. Sierra changed direction slightly, now heading toward the eastern ridge, where she knew a complex cave system extended deep into the mountain. The caves were technically off-limits to visitors due to safety concerns, but as a ranger, Sierra had received training in their basic layout for emergency response purposes. "Martinez!" "This is Blackwood," she said into her radio, keeping her voice low. "Be advised, K9 subject has tracking implant. Hostiles can locate electronically. I'm proceeding to Echo Ridge Cave system to disrupt tracking. Redirect backup to access point Charlie." The radio crackled with static before Martinez's voice came through, partially broken. "Copy. Echo Ridge. Security team. Rerouting. Careful." Sierra hoped enough of her message had been received. The cave system would provide temporary protection from tracking, but it also presented its own dangers: limited visibility, restricted movement, potential dead ends. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it might buy them enough time for reinforcements to arrive. Phantom suddenly stopped, his posture alert despite his weakened state. Sierra immediately halted, scanning their surroundings. The dog's ears were forward, his attention focused on something ahead of them. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, trusting the military canine senses over her own. The prisoner tensed beside her. He sensed something. These dogs are trained to detect threats well, beyond human perception. Sierra drew her weapon, keeping a firm grip on her prisoner, while trying to identify what had alerted Phantom. The forest seemed quiet, the only sounds being the gentle patter of raindrops on leaves and the distant call of a bird. Then she heard it, a faint metallic click, the kind made by a weapon being readied. Someone was ahead of them, waiting in ambush. Phantom looked up at Sierra, then deliberately shifted his body, pushing against her legs as if trying to guide her in a different direction. The intelligence in that action, not just alerting to danger, but suggesting an alternative route, reinforced everything the prisoner had said about Phantom's enhanced capabilities. "Good boy," Sierra whispered, allowing Phantom to lead them, on a slight detour that would bypass the potential threat ahead. As they moved carefully through the dense underbrush, Sierra kept her senses heightened for any sign of pursuit. The encounter had confirmed what she already suspected. They were being hunted by professionals who knew exactly what they were doing. But they were hunting in her territory, against an adversary who knew every tree, rock, and hidden trail. And she now had an ally whose capabilities exceeded normal K9 units. Despite the danger, despite the odds against them, Sierra felt a growing determination. Whatever was on that drive, whatever mission Phantom had been given, it was important enough for good people to die for, and for others to kill for. The dog had endured torture rather than fail in his duty. Sierra would honor that courage by ensuring his mission was completed, no matter what it took. As they approached the ridge that housed the cave system, Sierra saw Phantom's strength beginning to flag. His pace had slowed, his breathing becoming more labored. He needed rest and medical attention soon. "We need to stop briefly," Sierra announced, guiding them into a small protected hollow formed by the roots of an ancient fallen tree. The prisoner watched as Sierra helped Phantom settle onto the relatively dry ground beneath the natural shelter. "He's reaching his limits," he observed. "Military working dogs are conditioned for extreme endurance, but he's been through too much." Sierra knelt beside Phantom, checking his condition. His pulse was rapid, his breathing shallow. The wounds from the duct tape restraints were inflamed, and his overall condition was deteriorating. Yet his eyes remained alert, fixed on Sierra with unwavering focus. "You've done enough," she told the dog softly, stroking his head. "I'll take it from here." As if understanding her words, Phantom made a small movement, pressing his head against her hand with clear purpose. The gesture seemed to convey both trust and determination. He wasn't giving up. Sierra turned to her prisoner. "How long will he last without medical intervention?" The man assessed Phantom with clinical detachment. "In his current condition, maybe a few hours before system failure begins. The neural implants accelerate metabolism, increase physical capabilities, but they also demand more from the body. Without proper nutrition and hydration, the balance deteriorates rapidly. And these caves we're heading to, they'll definitely block the tracker. The prisoner hesitated, then nodded. The mineral composition interferes with the signal transmission, but it's temporary. The moment you emerge, they'll be able to locate him again. Sierra checked her watch. The security team would be arriving at the designated extraction point within the hour. If they could reach the caves, disrupt the tracking, signal long enough to throw off their pursuers, they might have a chance to rendezvous with backup and get Phantom the medical attention he desperately needed. "Time to move," she said, helping Phantom to his feet. The dog rose with visible effort, but maintained his position at her side, unwavering in his commitment. As they resumed their journey toward the caves, Sierra found herself increasingly impressed by Phantom's resilience and intelligence. Whatever had been done to enhance his capabilities, the core of what made him exceptional was something no technology could create, a spirit of absolute loyalty and determination that transcended his physical limitations. In that moment, Sierra made a silent promise to the remarkable animal beside her. His suffering would not be in vain. Whatever mission he had been given, whatever information he carried, she would ensure it reached its intended destination. And then she would make sure he received the care, respect, and freedom he had earned through his extraordinary courage. The caves loomed ahead, dark openings in the mountainside that promised temporary sanctuary. As they approached, Sierra felt Phantom press closer to her side, his warm presence a reminder of everything at stake in their desperate flight through the wilderness. Together, they stepped into the shadows, leaving the rain-soaked forest behind. As they ventured into the mountain's ancient depths, a ranger sworn to protect her forest, a soldier with uncertain allegiances, and a remarkable dog carrying secrets worth killing for. The cave entrance narrowed quickly as Sierra led her small group deeper into the mountain. The filtered daylight from outside gradually diminished, replaced by a profound darkness that swallowed their forms. Sierra retrieved a tactical flashlight from her pack, its powerful beam cutting through the gloom to reveal rough stone walls, glistening with moisture. "Stay close," she instructed both her prisoner and Phantom. "These caves can be disorienting, and there are drop-offs that aren't immediately visible." The air grew noticeably cooler as they progressed, carrying the earthy scent of mineral deposits and ancient stone. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, the sound echoing through the tunnels in an irregular rhythm. Sierra moved with practiced caution, her years of wilderness training evident in how she tested each step before committing her weight, constantly assessing the stability of the terrain. "How far do we need to go before the tracking signal is blocked?" she asked, glancing back at her prisoner. "The interference increases with depth," he replied, his voice bouncing off the close walls. "Half a mile should be sufficient if the mineral content is as high as you suggested." Sierra nodded and continued forward, occasionally checking on Phantom. The military K9 moved carefully behind her, his steps measured but increasingly unsteady. Even in the limited light, she could see his condition was deteriorating, his breathing more labored, his once powerful frame trembling with the effort of continued movement. "We need to find a place to rest soon," she said, more to herself than her companions. "Somewhere defensible where we can tend to his wounds properly." After navigating a particularly narrow passage that required them to proceed single file, the tunnel suddenly opened into a larger chamber. Sierra's flashlight couldn't illuminate the entire space, but the beam revealed a cavern, approximately 30 feet across, with a ceiling high enough that it disappeared into darkness above. A small underground stream cut across one side of the chamber, the water clear and cold. "This will work," Sierra decided, guiding them toward a relatively flat area near the water source, but away from the main tunnel entrance. "We'll rest here while we wait for the security team to reach the extraction point." She helped Phantom settle onto a smooth section of stone, noting with concern how quickly he collapsed once given permission to rest. The dog's sides heaved. With each breath, his once alert eyes now heavy with exhaustion. "He needs water and nutrients," the prisoner observed, "and those wounds require cleaning to prevent infection." Sierra kept her weapon ready while she unslung her pack, retrieving her first aid kit and emergency rations. "I'm going to remove your restraint so you can assist," she told the man. "Try anything, and you'll find out how accurate I am with this pistol." The man nodded once, pragmatic acceptance in his expression. "I have no desire to die in this cave, and despite our differences, I don't want to see the dog suffer unnecessarily." Sierra cautiously cut the zip ties binding his wrists, then handed him a small, collapsible bowl from her pack. "Fill this with water from the stream. It's clean. These caves are part of a protected watershed." While he complied, Sierra turned, her attention to Phantom. She gently examined the wounds around his neck, legs, and torso, where the duct tape had cut most severely into his flesh. Some areas showed signs of infection, red, inflamed skin with traces of pus at the edges. Others had begun to scab over, but would reopen with movement. The prisoner returned with the water kneeling beside them. "Military K9s are typically given a specialized electrolyte solution when dehydrated," he said, watching as Sierra offered the water to Phantom. "Plain water will help, but it's not enough to replace what he's lost." Sierra reached into her pack again, producing a packet of emergency electrolyte powder designed for human use in wilderness survival situations. "This might help," she said, mixing a carefully measured amount into a second bowl of water. "It's not veterinary grade, but the basic components are similar." The prisoner raised an eyebrow, a hint of respect crossing his features. Resourceful. Phantom lapped weakly at the solution, his instinctive need for hydration overcoming his exhaustion. Sierra then turned to the issue of nutrition, breaking an energy bar into small pieces. "Normally, I wouldn't give human food to a dog," she explained as she offered a small portion to Phantom, "but in a survival situation, some calories are better than none." She had selected the simplest bar from her supplies, one with minimal ingredients and no chocolate or other canine toxins. Phantom accepted the food cautiously at first, then with increasing enthusiasm as his body recognized the desperately needed calories. The prisoner watched the process with clinical interest. "The neural implants increase his metabolic rate," he explained. "Standard protocol calls for twice the caloric intake of a normal military working dog. At this point, he's essentially running on reserves that should have been depleted days ago." Sierra continued her care, using antiseptic wipes to clean the infected areas around Phantom's wounds. The dog flinched, but remained cooperative, his training evident even in his weakened state. "These need proper medical attention," she said, applying a thin layer of antibiotic ointment to the worst areas. "The best I can do is keep them clean and try to bring down the inflammation." As she worked, Sierra studied her prisoner more carefully, noting details she had missed in the urgency of their escape. He was older than she had initially thought, perhaps in his early 50s, with the hardened physicality of someone who had spent decades in rigorous field operations. His eyes held the calculating awareness of a veteran intelligence operative, constantly assessing, analyzing, adapting. "You haven't asked my name," he observed, meeting her gaze evenly. "Names can be as false as ID cards," Sierra replied. "I'm more interested in your actual role in this situation." The man smiled slightly, the expression not reaching his eyes. "Pragmatic. You can call me Lawson. It's as real as anything else about me at this point." He glanced toward Phantom. "I meant what I said about the dog. He's part of a program that goes beyond standard military working dogs. What they did to him, what they put inside him, it's revolutionary and dangerous." Sierra finished bandaging Phantom's worst wounds with strips of clean gauze from her kit. Revolutionary how? Lawson hesitated, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. The neural implants don't just track him or enhance his senses. They allow for direct input of complex command sequences, essentially programming objectives that supersede his training. More importantly, they can store and encrypt digital data within an organic component that interfaces with his brain. You're saying the USB drive isn't the only storage device? Sierra asked, her hands pausing in their work. The drive contains only part of the information, a security measure. The complete data package includes content stored within the implant itself. It's designed to require both components for full access, and it needs Phantom alive and functioning to retrieve the organic portion. Lawson's expression darkened. That's why the orders changed from retrieval to elimination. Someone decided the risk of the information being recovered outweighed the value of the program itself. Sierra processed this information, its implications, expanding her understanding of why Phantom had been treated with such brutality. If what Lawson said was true, the dog wasn't just carrying information. He was part of the information storage system itself. Who gave that order? She asked. Who has the authority to terminate a program like this? That's what I'd like to know, Lawson replied, surprising her with what seemed like genuine anger. I was the security lead for the Cerebral K9 initiative from its inception. 3 years of development, millions in funding, breakthrough results. Then suddenly I'm pulled from my position, assigned to cleanup, and told the entire program has been compromised. Sierra studied him, trying to assess his sincerity. If you're the security lead, why were you zip-tying a valuable asset to a pole and leaving him to die? I wasn't. Lawson's face hardened. By the time I tracked Phantom to these mountains, someone had already restrained him and left him in that storage building. I was following his tracker signal to recover him, preferably alive, despite my new orders. What you interrupted wasn't an elimination attempt, but a retrieval operation. Sierra's instincts told her he was telling at least a partial truth. His knowledge of the program seemed genuine, and his concern for Phantom's condition, while clinical, appeared sincere. Then who zip-tied him? She asked. And who are the men hunting us now? Contractor team, Lawson answered grimly. Deniable assets brought in for sensitive operations. When I was removed from the program, they replaced my security team with these contractors. I don't know who they answer to, but it's not through standard military channels. The pieces were beginning to form a disturbing picture. A classified program with experimental technology, a sudden change in protocol, contractors operating outside normal chains of command, and information valuable enough to kill for all, revolving around the remarkable animal now resting beside Sierra. She checked her watch, then attempted radio contact with the extraction team. As expected, the dense rocks surrounding them blocked the signal completely. They were temporarily safe from tracking, but also cut off from potential rescue. We need to make decisions, Sierra said, returning her attention to Lawson. I can't verify your story, and I'm not handing over Phantom or the drive on your word alone. But I also need to get him medical attention soon, or none of this will matter. Lawson nodded slowly. I understand your position, and I respect it. He glanced toward the tunnel they had entered through. Those contractors won't give up easily. They're likely securing the cave entrances as we speak, preparing for us to emerge. When we do, Phantom's tracker will activate again, and they'll have his exact location within minutes. So we need an alternative exit, Sierra concluded. One they don't know about or won't expect us to use. She studied the chamber more, carefully, directing her flashlight toward unexplored sections. The cave system was extensive, with multiple branches and levels. As a ranger, Sierra had basic knowledge of the main passages, but much of the complex remained unmapped or known only to specialized cave exploration teams. There's an underground river that runs through the lower levels of this system, she said, recalling details from her training. It emerges about 3 miles south of here, creating a small waterfall before joining Boulder Creek. If we can find an access point to that river, we might have an alternate route out. Lawson considered. The water would help mask our scent trail as well, making it harder for them to track us conventionally once we're back on the surface. Sierra nodded, her decision made. We'll rest here for another 30 minutes to let Phantom recover some strength and to give the security team time to get closer to the extraction point. Then we find that river. While they waited, Sierra tended further to Phantom's needs, offering more water and small portions of food. The dog responded to her care with increasing alertness, his remarkable resilience evident in how quickly he absorbed the limited resources she could provide. He's extraordinary, Sierra observed quietly. Even without the technology, his spirit and training are exceptional. He was the best candidate the program had ever seen, Lawson agreed. Perfect combination of intelligence, physical capabilities, and temperament. His bond with his handler was remarkable as well. They functioned almost as a single unit in field operations. Sierra remembered the story Lawson had told earlier about Phantom's handler. You said Captain Mercer went rogue and died by suicide when cornered. Was that true? Something shifted in Lawson's expression, a subtle tension around the eyes. That was the official report. And the unofficial version? Lawson remained silent for a long moment. The mission changed, he finally said. Mercer was deployed for what he thought was a standard intelligence-gathering operation. What he discovered was something else entirely, something that apparently troubled him enough to risk everything by going outside approved channels. And that information is what Phantom is carrying. I believe so, Lawson replied. I don't know the details. That was above my clearance level. I just know that after Mercer's death, Phantom disappeared, with both the physical drive and whatever data was uploaded to his implant. He was following his final directive from Mercer, deliver the information to someone who could act on it. Sierra processed this, the pieces forming a clearer picture. So Phantom isn't just carrying random intelligence, he's carrying evidence. Something specific that someone powerful doesn't want revealed. That would be my assessment, Lawson. Confirmed. And given the resources being deployed to prevent its delivery, it must be extraordinarily damaging. Sierra checked her watch again. Their rest period was nearly over, and difficult decisions lay ahead. She turned to Phantom, who had been watching their conversation with that uncanny awareness that went beyond normal canine intelligence. Time to move, boy, she said softly. We need to find that river. Phantom rose to his feet with visible effort but greater steadiness than before. The brief rest and limited nutrition had helped restore some of his strength, though Sierra knew it was temporary at best. They needed to get him proper medical care within hours, not days. Gathering their limited supplies, Sierra led them toward a narrow tunnel branching off from the main chamber, following the subtle sound of running water that suggested it might lead to the underground river. She kept her flashlight directed at the ground, watching for unstable areas or potential drop-offs as they ventured deeper into the cave system. The passage descended steadily, the air growing cooler and damper as they progressed. Occasional formations of stalactites and stalagmites created natural obstacles. They navigated carefully, the mineral deposits glittering like jewels in the flashlight beam. After nearly half an hour of cautious progress, the tunnel widened into another chamber, where the sound of flowing water was markedly louder. Sierra directed her light toward the source, revealing a dark, swift current cutting through the cave floor, the underground river she had hoped to find. "This has to connect to the southern exit eventually," she said, studying the water's flow direction. "The question is whether we can follow it safely." The river itself was approximately 15 feet across, flowing through a channel it had carved over millennia. Along one side ran a narrow stone ledge, just wide enough for careful passage, that appeared to follow the water's course deeper into the mountain. Lawson assessed the route with experienced eyes. "Treacherous, but possible. How's your climbing ability?" "Sufficient," Sierra replied simply. She was in fact an experienced climber, her ranger duties having required technical rock skills. On numerous occasions, the concern is Phantom. In his condition, that ledge presents significant challenges. They both looked at the dog, who stood at the water's edge, studying the current with what appeared to be tactical assessment. Without prompting, Phantom began moving along the shoreline, testing different access points to the ledge. His behavior demonstrated problem-solving capabilities well beyond standard canine abilities. "He's analyzing the route," Lawson observed quietly, "looking for the optimal entry point based on his current physical limitations. This is what made the program so revolutionary. The implants enhance their natural intelligence without replacing it." Sierra watched as Phantom identified a section where natural stone steps provided easier access to the ledge. The dog looked back at her as if seeking approval for his selection. "Good boy," she acknowledged, moving toward the spot he had identified. "We'll try it here." Sierra went first, securing herself on the narrow ledge and testing its stability, before gesturing for Phantom to follow. The dog navigated the initial climb with methodical precision, compensating for his weakened state with careful paw placement. Once on the ledge, he pressed his body against the wall, maximizing his stability on the limited surface. Lawson joined them last, his movements betraying specialized training in difficult terrain navigation. Together, the unusual trio began their precarious journey along the underground river, Sierra leading with her flashlight, illuminating several feet ahead, Phantom in the middle, and Lawson bringing up the rear. Progress was slow and demanding. The ledge varied in width from barely 12 inches at its narrowest to nearly 3 feet at its widest points. In some sections, they were forced to edge sideways, backs pressed against the damp cave wall. In others, they could move more freely, though the sound of rushing water beside them remained a constant reminder of the consequences of a misstep. Sierra kept checking Phantom, concerned about his stamina for such physically demanding travel. The dog moved with remarkable discipline, calculating each step with the precision of a trained operative. Even in his compromised state, his specialized training was evident in how he navigated the challenging terrain. After what felt like hours, but was likely less than 45 minutes, the ledge widened into a small alcove where they could rest more comfortably. Sierra called a brief halt, all of them needing to recover from the intense concentration required for the narrow passage. "How much farther do you think?" Lawson asked, his voice nearly lost beneath the river's constant flow. Sierra studied their surroundings, noting subtle changes in the air current and the river's behavior. "The water's moving faster, and there's a different quality to the air. I think we're approaching an exit, maybe half a mile more." She checked Phantom again, offering him water from her dwindling supply. The dog drank gratefully, then rested, his head against her leg in a gesture that seemed both appreciative and reassuring, as if he were telling her he could continue. "We should discuss what happens when we reach the surface," Lawson said, his tone serious. "The trackers will reacquire Phantom signal immediately. We'll have minutes at best before they converge on our location." Sierra had been considering this problem throughout their journey. "The exit point should be near Boulder Creek. If we can cross immediately and continue south toward Ranger Station 17, we'll have the best chance of meeting up with the security team. And if we encounter the contractors before then," Sierra met his gaze directly, "then I'll do what's necessary to protect Phantom and complete his mission." She patted the service weapon at her hip. "I'm not just a ranger. I served 2 tours. In Afghanistan, I know how to handle hostile contact." Lawson nodded, seeming to reassess her capabilities based on this information. "Former military explains a lot about your responses. What branch?" "Army, 10th Mountain Division," Sierra replied, "specialized in alpine warfare and reconnaissance." A look of genuine respect crossed Lawson's features. "That's significantly better than sufficient climbing experience." Sierra allowed a small smile. "I prefer to underpromise and overdeliver." She turned her attention back to the path ahead. "Ready to continue?" They resumed their careful progress along the ledge, the sound of the river growing louder as they advanced. Eventually, the passage began to widen, and Sierra detected a significant change in the air, fresher, carrying faint scents of pine and recent rain. They were approaching the exit. The river itself changed character as well, becoming more turbulent. As it neared the surface, the ledge they followed began to incline upward, gradually rising above the water level until they were several feet above the churning current. Finally, Sierra's flashlight beam caught the unmistakable gleam of natural daylight ahead, filtered and dim, but definitely daylight. They had reached the exit point where the underground river emerged from the mountain. "Wait here," Sierra instructed, moving ahead to assess their situation. She approached cautiously, staying low and avoiding silhouetting herself against the opening. The river exited through a relatively narrow aperture before dropping approximately 20 feet as a waterfall into a churning pool below. Beyond that, the water continued as Boulder Creek, winding through the forest, just as Sierra had hoped. From her position, she could see dense trees providing good cover on both sides of the creek, with no immediate signs of human presence. Sierra returned to her companions. "The exit is clear for now. We'll have a challenging initial descent, about 20 feet down slippery rock to reach the pool below. From there, we can access the forest and move toward the extraction point." Lawson nodded. "And Phantom? Can he manage that descent in his condition?" They both looked at the military K9, whose strength had been visibly fading during the final stretch of their underground journey. The brief rest periods had helped, but each one provided diminishing returns as his reserves continued to deplete. Sierra knelt beside Phantom, meeting his intelligent gaze. "What do you think, boy? One more big effort, then we get you proper help?" Phantom's response was to rise steadily to his feet, his posture communicating readiness despite his obvious fatigue. The determination in his bearing reminded Sierra of wounded soldiers she'd served with, men and women who pushed through pain and exhaustion because the mission demanded it. "We'll descend one at a time," Sierra decided. "I'll go first to secure the route and confirm the area is clear. Lawson, you'll help Phantom navigate the difficult sections, then follow last." Lawson raised an eyebrow. "You're trusting me to follow rather than sending me first." "I'm trusting you to understand that Phantom's survival best serves your interests as well," Sierra replied evenly. "If you want to know what's on that drive and in his implant, if you want answers about why your program was compromised, you need him alive and in the right hands." The logic was sound, and Lawson acknowledged it with a slight nod. "Fair assessment." Sierra moved to the cave exit, studying the rock face they would need to descend. In dry conditions, it would be a straightforward climb for someone with her experience, but the constant spray from the waterfall made the surface treacherously slick, requiring extreme caution. She removed a coil of paracord from her pack, standard equipment for wilderness operations, and quickly fashioned a simple harness that would help support Phantom during the descent. It wasn't ideal, but it would distribute his weight and give Lawson better control in guiding the weakened dog down the rock face. "This should help," she said, fitting the improvised harness around Phantom's torso. "It will take some of the strain off his injured areas." With their preparations complete, Sierra began her descent, finding reliable handholds and testing each foothold before committing her weight. The rock was slippery as expected, but there were enough natural features to create a manageable route. She moved deliberately, mentally mapping the best path for Phantom to follow. Upon reaching the pool below, Sierra quickly scanned their surroundings, confirming they were still alone. She positioned herself at the base of the rock face, ready to assist if needed. "Clear below!" she called up, keeping her voice just loud, enough to carry over the waterfall's sound. "Send Phantom down first." Lawson guided the military K9 to the edge, using the paracord harness to provide support as Phantom began navigating the descent. The dog moved with remarkable precision, despite his condition, finding the path Sierra had used and adapting it to his four-legged structure. At particularly challenging sections, Lawson provided additional support through the harness, taking weight off Phantom's weakened limbs. Sierra watched with growing admiration as the dog problem-solved his way down the rock face. His movements were those of a highly trained operative, methodical, efficient, constantly adjusting to changing conditions. Even in his severely compromised state, Phantom demonstrated capabilities that went far beyond conventional military working dogs. When he was within a few feet of the bottom, Sierra moved forward to help guide his final descent. The moment Phantom reached the ground, he conducted a quick perimeter check, circling the immediate area and scanning for threats before returning to Sierra's side. The behavior was so soldier-like that it reinforced everything Lawson had told her about the Cerebral K9 initiative. Lawson descended last, his movements betraying professional climbing experience. Once they were all safely on the ground, Sierra immediately led them across the creek and into the forest beyond, knowing they had limited time before Phantom's tracker became active again. "Security team should be approaching from the southeast," she said, as they moved through the dense underbrush. "If we maintain this pace, we might intercept them within an hour." Phantom stayed close to her side, his movements becoming increasingly labored despite his determined spirit. The descent had taken a visible toll on his remaining strength, and Sierra knew they were operating on borrowed time. They had covered perhaps half a mile when Phantom suddenly stopped, his posture alerting to something ahead. His ears flattened against his skull, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Sierra immediately went still, signaling Lawson to do the same. She listened intently, filtering out the natural forest sounds until she detected what had alerted Phantom, the faint but unmistakable sound of human movement through vegetation, approximately 100 yards ahead. "Contact front," she whispered, drawing her weapon. "Unknown number." Lawson moved closer, his voice barely audible. "Contractors. They must have anticipated the river exit and positioned accordingly." He glanced at Phantom. "His tracker is active again. They know exactly where we are." Sierra quickly assessed their options. "We need to change direction, create distance, find another route to the extraction point." Before they could move, Phantom made a definitive shift in position, pressing against Sierra's legs to guide her westward, away from both the approaching threat and their planned route. "He's suggesting an alternative," Lawson observed quietly. "I've seen this behavior in training. When they identify a superior tactical option, they're conditioned to indicate it to their handlers." Sierra looked down at Phantom, seeing the clear intention in his stance. Despite everything he had endured, the dog was still functioning as a tactical asset, still applying his specialized training to their survival. "Lead the way, boy," she said softly. Phantom moved with renewed purpose, guiding them on a path that utilized natural terrain features for concealment. He selected routes that minimized noise and sign, taking advantage of rocky patches to reduce tracks and dense vegetation for visual and cover. Even in his weakened state, his specialized training was evident in every decision. Sierra followed his lead, trusting the military K9's superior senses and tactical awareness. Whatever had been done to enhance his natural abilities, it was now serving to keep them all alive. A ranger, a mysterious operative, and a remarkable dog, carrying secrets that powerful people would kill to suppress. As they moved deeper into the forest, Sierra placed her hand on Phantom's head, a silent acknowledgement of his extraordinary courage and intelligence. In return, the dog pressed briefly against her leg, a gesture that transcended species and spoke to the profound connection forming between them. Together, they continued their desperate journey through the wilderness, racing against time, pursuing enemies, and Phantom's fading strength. The mission that had begun with a cruelly restrained dog in an abandoned building had evolved into something far more complex and dangerous, a mission that Sierra was now irrevocably committed to completing, no matter the personal cost. Phantom led them through increasingly dense forest, selecting a path that balanced concealment with his diminishing strength. The dog moved with purpose, occasionally pausing to reassess their route when terrain features presented multiple options. Each decision demonstrated exceptional tactical awareness, utilizing fallen trees for cover, selecting stream crossings at rocky points to minimize tracks, and avoiding ridge lines where they might be silhouetted against the sky. Sierra followed closely, her respect for the military K9 growing with each calculated choice. Behind them, Lawson maintained vigilant awareness of their back trail, his field experience evident in how he occasionally adjusted his movement to further minimize sign of their passage. "He's creating an unpredictable pattern," Lawson observed quietly as they paused in a small ravine to catch their breath. "Standard evasion tactics, mixing directions, doubling back occasionally, utilizing terrain features that disrupt tracking. This isn't just instinct, it's specialized training." Sierra nodded, watching as Phantom methodically scanned their surroundings despite his obvious exhaustion. "How much of this is the neural enhancement versus his base training?" "It's integrated," Lawson replied. "The technology amplifies existing capabilities rather than replacing them. Phantom was already an exceptional dog before the program, top percentile in problem-solving, target discrimination, and environmental adaptation. The neural implants enhanced his spatial reasoning and tactical assessment capabilities, allowing him to process options more comprehensively." Sierra checked her watch, then consulted her mental map of the wilderness area. They had been moving for nearly 40 minutes since emerging from the cave system, covering difficult terrain at a challenging pace. The extraction point was still at least 2 miles away, assuming they could maintain a direct route. "We need to contact the security team," she said. "Let them know our position and situation." She tried her radio again, relieved when the signal connected with only minimal static. "Sierra Blackwood to base. Do you copy?" After a brief pause, Jake's voice came through. "Blackwood, this is base. Good to hear your voice. What's your status?" "Currently 2 miles northwest of Extraction Point Charlie, 1 injured military. K9, 1 detained subject, being pursued by unknown number of armed hostiles. Request security team redirection to our position." "Copy that," Jake responded, the background noise suggesting he was coordinating simultaneously with other personnel. "Security team is currently at the original extraction point. They can reroute to intercept, but it will take approximately 30 minutes to reach your position. Can you maintain evasion until then?" Sierra glanced at Phantom, assessing his condition objectively. The dog was showing increasing signs of physical distress. Labored breathing, trembling muscles, occasional disorientation despite his determined focus. Without medical intervention soon, his system would begin shutting down. "Negative," she replied. "K9 subject requires immediate medical attention. Cannot guarantee his condition will remain stable for another 30 minutes of evasion." There was a brief silence before Jake responded. Understood. Air support has been authorized. Forest Service helicopter is being diverted from fire surveillance duty. ETA to your position 18 minutes. Can you reach a clearing large enough for extraction? This changed the tactical equation significantly. Helicopter extraction would eliminate the need to reach the original extraction point, assuming they could find a suitable landing zone and maintain their position until the helicopter arrived. Affirmative, Sierra replied. There's an old logging clearance approximately half a mile east of our current position. Coordinates to follow. She quickly relayed the numerical coordinates for the clearing, which she knew from her extensive familiarity with the wilderness area. Coordinates received, Jake confirmed. Security team will converge on that location as well. Be advised, helicopter is equipped with basic medical supplies, but no veterinary personnel. Forest Service pilot plus 2 security officers on board. Copy that. Moving to the extraction point now. Blackwood out. Sierra turned to her companions. Change of plans. Helicopter extraction in 18 minutes. We need to reach a clearing half a mile east and secure it until they arrive. Lawson processed this information with a tactician's focus. The contractors will have monitored that transmission. They know our destination now. Yes, Sierra acknowledged. But they don't know we're aware of their presence or their numbers. And we have Phantom's tactical capabilities to help us reach the clearing first and establish a defensive position. She knelt beside the military K9, who had been listening with that uncanny awareness that continued to impress her. Phantom, we need to move east to a large clearing, fast as you can manage, understand? The dog's response was immediate. Rising to his feet with visible effort but clear determination, he oriented himself briefly, then began moving in the correct direction without hesitation, selecting a path that balanced speed with security. As they followed Phantom's lead, Sierra assessed their tactical situation. The clearing she had selected offered both advantages and vulnerabilities. Being open ground, it provided the necessary space for helicopter landing while eliminating the possibility of close-quarters ambush from vegetation. However, it also meant they would be exposed once they reached it, potentially vulnerable to long-range fire if the contractors possessed appropriate weapons. Phantom suddenly slowed, his posture indicating he had detected something ahead. Sierra signaled for Lawson to halt, then moved forward to join the dog. Through the trees, she could see the edge of the clearing approximately 60 yards away. But Phantom's attention was focused on something else, a subtle movement among the vegetation at the clearing's northern perimeter. They're already there, Sierra whispered, recognizing the tactical positioning of someone establishing a covered observation point. At least one, possibly more, setting up to intercept us when we enter the clearing. Lawson moved silently to join them, assessing the situation with experienced eyes. They anticipated our destination. Helicopter extraction is the logical choice when evading with an injured asset. Sierra studied the clearing more carefully, identifying potential approaches and fields of fire. The contractors had selected optimal positions to cover the most likely entry points, but their focus appeared to be on the clearing itself rather than the surrounding forest. We need to circle around, she decided, approach from an unexpected direction and neutralize the threat before the helicopter arrives. Phantom was already moving, having apparently reached the same tactical conclusion. He led them in a wide arc that utilized a depression in the terrain to conceal their movement while keeping them outside the contractor's likely field of view. As they circled, Sierra formulated a plan. I count at least 2 hostiles at the northern edge, likely more, positioned to cover other approaches. We need to create a diversion to draw their attention, then neutralize the immediate threat. and secure the landing zone. Lawson nodded. The helicopter is our best chance of getting Phantom to safety, whatever it takes. Sierra was mildly surprised by his apparent commitment to the dog's welfare, given his earlier role in the operation. Reading her expression, Lawson offered a grim smile. "My objective has always been to protect the program," he said quietly. "That includes its most valuable asset. Whatever Phantom is carrying, whatever Captain Mercer discovered, it must be important enough to justify this level of response. I want to know what it is as much as you do." Sierra accepted this with a nod. Self-interest aligned with Phantom's survival was better than active opposition. "I need a diversion on the eastern perimeter. Can you manage that?" Lawson considered. "Yes. What exactly did you have in mind?" Sierra quickly outlined her plan. Lawson would create a distraction at the far side of the clearing while she and Phantom approached the nearest contractors from behind. The goal was to neutralize the immediate threat without a prolonged firefight that might endanger the approaching helicopter or further deplete Phantom's diminishing reserves. With their roles established, they separated, Lawson moving toward the eastern edge, while Sierra and Phantom continued their circular approach toward the northern perimeter where they had spotted the first contractors. Phantom stayed close beside her, his movements becoming increasingly deliberate as he compensated for his weakening condition. Despite this, his tactical awareness remained sharp, guiding Sierra toward optimal concealment as they closed in on their targets. Through the trees, Sierra could now clearly see two men in dark tactical gear positioned at the clearing's edge. They were equipped with what appeared to be compact assault rifles and communication headsets, their focus primarily on the clearing itself rather than the forest behind them. Sierra and Phantom were approximately 30 yards from the contractor's position when a sudden commotion erupted from the eastern side of the clearing. Lawson had created his diversion, a series of breaking branches and rustling vegetation that immediately drew the contractor's attention. Both men turned toward the disturbance, one speaking urgently into his headset, while the other raised his weapon toward the eastern tree line. Their momentary distraction provided the opening Sierra needed. She moved swiftly and silently through the underbrush, closing half the distance before the contractors could respond to their suddenly precarious situation. Phantom advanced alongside her, his training overriding his physical limitations as they executed the coordinated approach. When they were approximately 15 feet from the nearest contractor, the man sensed their presence, beginning to turn with his weapon, starting to swing in their direction. Sierra acted decisively. "Federal officer, drop your weapons!" The contractors reacted with professional speed, the nearest diving for cover while bringing his weapon to bear, the other dropping to a firing position. Their coordinated response confirmed Lawson's assessment. These were highly trained operatives, not common mercenaries. What happened next occurred in a blur of motion that Sierra's combat-trained mind processed in tactical fragments. Phantom launched forward despite his weakened condition, a directed missile of muscle and training that targeted the nearest contractor's weapon arm. Sierra simultaneously moved laterally to create separation between herself and the dog, presenting the contractors with divided targets while bringing her service weapon to bear. The nearest contractor fired a hasty shot that went wide as Phantom impacted his arm, powerful jaws clamping onto his wrist with precisely calculated force. The man cried out, his weapon falling from suddenly nerveless fingers as trained canine teeth found pressure points with surgical precision. The second contractor shifted his aim toward Phantom, presenting Sierra with the clean shot she needed. She fired once, her round finding the man's shoulder, a non-lethal target that nonetheless effectively removed him from the immediate fight as he fell backward, his weapon discharging harmlessly into the air. Sierra closed the distance to the first contractor, who was struggling ineffectively against Phantom's controlled hold. "Federal officer, cease resistance immediately." The man froze, recognizing the authority in her voice and the resolved situation. Phantom maintained his grip until Sierra gave him a release command, at which point the dog backed away, positioning himself to cover both contractors while Sierra secured their weapons. "On the ground, face down, hands behind your backs," she ordered, her weapon never wavering from her targets. As the contractors complied, Lawson emerged from the trees on the opposite side of the clearing, dragging a third man who appeared to be unconscious. "Found this one setting up a sniper position," he explained, securing the man beside the others. "There was a fourth, but he rabbited when the shots were fired, heading southwest at last visual." Sierra quickly zip-tied the contractors' wrists and ankles, using their own restraints found in their tactical vests. A rapid search yielded communication devices, additional weapons, and identification that confirmed Lawson's assessment. Private military contractors operating under unclear authority. The entire engagement had lasted less than 90 seconds, but the exertion had taken a visible toll on Phantom. The military K9 was now struggling to remain standing, his breathing increasingly labored, his once precise movements becoming uncoordinated. "He's crashing," Lawson observed with genuine concern. "The neural implants are drawing more energy than his body can provide. Without immediate intervention, he'll experience complete system failure." Sierra knelt beside Phantom, her hand gently supporting his weight as his legs began to buckle. "Stay with me, boy," she urged softly. "Help is almost here." In the distance, the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors became audible. Their extraction, approaching with precious medical supplies that might stabilize Phantom long enough to reach proper veterinary care. Sierra maintained her position, supporting Phantom while keeping their captives under observation. Lawson moved to the center of the clearing, preparing to signal the approaching helicopter for landing guidance. The Forest Service helicopter appeared over the tree line, a white and green Bell 407 with emergency response capabilities. It circled once to assess the landing zone, then descended toward the clearing's center where Lawson stood with visibly empty hands. As the helicopter settled onto the grassy surface, its rotors continuing to spin at idle speed, the side door slid open to reveal two armed Forest Service security officers in tactical gear. They quickly secured the perimeter while the pilot remained at the controls, engine running for immediate departure. One of the security officers, a woman with sergeant's stripes on her uniform, approached Sierra's position. "Ranger Blackwood, I'm Sergeant Torres. We received your situation report. Medical kit is on board." "The K9 needs immediate attention," Sierra replied, still supporting Phantom's weakening form. "Severe dehydration, extensive injuries from restraint and complications from specialized implants." Torres gestured toward the helicopter. "Let's get him aboard. We've got IV fluids and basic trauma supplies, not veterinary specific, but it might stabilize him until we reach proper medical facilities." Together, they carefully lifted Phantom, who was now barely conscious, his extraordinary resilience finally giving way to the combined effects of his injuries, deprivation, and the continuous drain of his neural implants. "What about the prisoners?" Torres asked, nodding toward the secured contractors. "Second security team is 15 minutes out," Sierra decided. "They can process and transport the detainees. Our priority is getting Phantom to medical care before it's too late." As they carried Phantom toward the waiting helicopter, the dog made a weak sound, not quite a whine, not quite a growl, and fixed his fading gaze on Sierra with unmistakable urgency. "Wait," she said, pausing their progress. "He's trying to communicate something." Phantom's eyes moved deliberately from Sierra to Lawson, then back again. His message was clear, even without words. "Lawson comes too. Sierra considered this briefly, understanding the implications. Despite everything, Phantom seemed to recognize that Lawson possessed crucial knowledge about his condition and the technology integrated into his body, knowledge that might be essential for his survival. "He comes with us," Sierra decided, nodding toward Lawson. "He has specialized knowledge of the K9's enhancements that may be critical for treatment." Torres hesitated momentarily, then nodded. "Your call, Ranger, but he's your responsibility." They continued to the helicopter, securing Phantom on the floor of the cabin, where Torres immediately began establishing an IV line to deliver emergency fluids. Sierra and Lawson boarded after ensuring the remaining security officer had the prisoners under control. As the helicopter lifted off, Sierra maintained physical contact with Phantom, who seemed to draw some comfort from her presence despite his deteriorating condition. His breathing had become shallow and irregular, his powerful body trembling with the effort of basic biological functions. "Can you help him?" Sierra asked Lawson over the roar of the rotors. Lawson was already examining Phantom with clinical focus, checking specific points on the dog's head, where the implants interfaced with his brain. "The implants are drawing more energy than he can produce. It's like running a high-performance computer on a dying battery. We need to either boost his biological systems or temporarily reduce the implant's power consumption." "Can it be done with what we have here?" Lawson's expression was grim but determined. "Possibly. The implants have emergency protocols designed to preserve core functions in critical situations, but activating them requires specialized access." He reached carefully into Phantom's ear, locating a nearly invisible access point concealed within the natural structure. "I need something thin and rigid. A wire, pin, anything metallic about this size." He indicated a dimension approximately the thickness of a paperclip. Torres, monitoring Phantom's condition while maintaining the IV flow, reached into a pocket of her tactical vest and produced a small multi-tool. "Will this help?" Lawson selected a thin probe from the tool's attachments and carefully inserted it into the concealed port in Phantom's ear. His movements were precise, confident, clearly demonstrating his familiarity with the technology. "This should initiate conservation mode," he explained, making a minute adjustment. "It will temporarily disable the enhanced cognitive functions, while maintaining basic life support and data integrity." After several tense seconds, Phantom's breathing pattern changed, becoming slightly deeper and more regular. The trembling in his limbs subsided somewhat, though his overall condition remained critical. "It's working," Lawson confirmed. "We've reduced the drain on his system by about 60%. It buys us time, but he still needs proper medical intervention. The damage from dehydration and physical trauma is extensive." Sierra maintained her steady contact with Phantom, her hand resting gently on his side where she could feel his heartbeat gradually stabilizing. "Where are we taking him?" she asked Torres. "Regional Emergency Veterinary Center in Westridge," Torres replied. "They've been alerted to expect a critical K9 patient, 25 minutes flight time." Sierra looked down at Phantom, his eyes now closed as his body focused its remaining resources on survival. The dog who had endured days of torture, who had escaped and navigated miles of wilderness with critical information, who had protected her against armed threats despite his failing strength, was now fighting his final battle. Simply to stay alive. "He's going to make it," she said firmly, as much to convince herself as anyone else. "After everything he's survived, he's not going to quit now." Lawson studied her with an unreadable expression. "You've formed a bond with him. That's not surprising. The program specifically developed these dogs to create rapid, intense handler connections. But you should understand what Phantom is. He's not just a dog. He's a hybrid system, part biological, part technology. The data he carries may be more valuable than his life in the larger context. Sierra met his gaze directly. I understand exactly what he is. He's a soldier who's completed his mission at enormous personal cost. He's a living being who's shown extraordinary courage and loyalty. And right now, he's my responsibility. Her voice took on an edge of steel. His life is not subordinate to the data he carries. We save both. Something shifted in Lawson's expression. A flicker of what might have been respect, or perhaps reassessment. That commitment might be tested when we discover what information Captain Mercer considered worth dying for. Sierra's response was interrupted by a sudden change in Phantom's condition. The dog's body stiffened, a tremor running through his frame that quickly escalated into what appeared to be a seizure. "He's crashing!" Torres called out, her hands moving to stabilize Phantom's airway. "IV isn't enough. He needs more intervention than we can provide here." Lawson moved with unexpected urgency, his previous clinical detachment replaced by focused intensity. "The implant's survival protocol isn't sufficient. We need to bypass the safety limiters." He looked at Sierra. "It's risky. Could cause permanent damage to the neural hardware, but without it, he won't survive long enough to reach medical facilities." Sierra didn't hesitate. "Do it." Lawson retrieved the probe again, this time accessing a different point at the base of Phantom's skull. His movements were swift but precise as he engaged a series of adjustments that seemed to require specific sequencing. "This will temporarily redirect all implant resources to biological support," he explained. "It means sacrificing the enhanced functions and potentially compromising data integrity, but it might keep him alive until we reach help." The procedure took less than a minute, during which Phantom's seizure gradually subsided. His breathing remained shallow but stabilized into a more sustainable rhythm. "It's working," Torres confirmed, checking the dog's vital signs. "Heart rate stabilizing, respiration improving slightly. Whatever you did, it's buying us time." Lawson sat back, watching Phantom with an expression that suggested personal investment beyond professional interest. "He's remarkably resilient even for a cerebral canine. Most would have succumbed days ago under similar conditions." Sierra maintained her physical connection with Phantom, her hand resting gently on his flank. What made him different? Why was he selected for the program? "Exceptional baseline characteristics," Lawson replied. "Intelligence, problem-solving, physical capabilities, all top percentile." But what truly set him apart was his psychological profile. Most dogs that intelligent tend to be independent, challenging to control. Phantom combined superior intelligence with an unusual capacity for bonding and loyalty, the perfect balance for the program's objectives. The helicopter banked slightly, beginning its approach to Westridge. Through the window, Sierra could see the Regional Emergency Veterinary Center, a modern facility with a dedicated helipad for air ambulance services. "We're 2 minutes from landing," the pilot announced over the internal communication system. "Medical team is standing by." "Clinton." As if hearing and understanding these words, Phantom's eyes opened briefly, finding Sierra's face with focused clarity despite his critical condition. In that moment of connection, she saw something that transcended his training and enhancements, a spirit of extraordinary determination and trust. "Almost there, boy," she said softly. "You've done your part. Let us do the rest now." The helicopter descended toward the helipad, where a medical team waited with a gurney and equipment. Sierra prepared to transition Phantom from their care to the specialized veterinary intervention that represented his best chance of survival. As they touched down, she made a silent promise to the remarkable animal who had entered her life so unexpectedly. She would protect both his life and his. Mission: whatever information he carried, whatever shadowy forces sought to suppress it, she would ensure that his extraordinary sacrifice served its intended purpose. The side door slid open, and the veterinary team rushed forward to receive their unique patient. As they transferred Phantom onto the waiting gurney, his eyes found Sierra's one more time, a connection that communicated more than words could express. Then he was gone, whisked away into the emergency treatment facility, leaving Sierra and Lawson standing on the helipad with the weight of unanswered questions and uncertain consequences pressing upon them. "What happens now?" Torres asked, securing the medical equipment they had used during the flight. Sierra watched the doors through which Phantom had disappeared, her decision already made. "Now we wait, and we prepare for whatever comes next." Because something told her that Phantom's rescue was just the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous situation, one that powerful people had already demonstrated they would kill to contain. The USB drive in her pocket and whatever data resided in Phantom's neural implants represented a truth someone desperately wanted to remain hidden. And Sierra Blackwood, forest ranger, former soldier, and now self-appointed guardian of an extraordinary dog, was determined to uncover it no matter the personal cost. The veterinary center's waiting area was designed to project calm, neutral colors, comfortable seating, subdued lighting. But Sierra felt anything but tranquil as she paced the length of the room. 3 hours had passed since Phantom had been rushed into emergency treatment, and the lack of updates had her nerves stretched to breaking point. Lawson sat in a corner chair, outwardly composed, but betrayed by the tension visible in his clasped hands. 2 Forest Service security officers maintained a discreet presence near the entrance, their attention divided between monitoring the facility's access points and observing Lawson. Sierra checked her watch for perhaps the 30th time when the treatment area doors finally opened. A woman in surgical scrubs emerged, her expression professionally neutral as she approached. "Ranger Blackwood, I'm Dr. Velasquez, veterinary, trauma specialist." She extended her hand, which Sierra shook reflexively. "Your canine is stabilized. We've addressed the dehydration, administered broad-spectrum antibiotics for the infected wounds, and provided nutritional support. His vital signs are improving, though he remains in critical condition." Sierra released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you, Doctor. When can I see him?" Dr. Velasquez hesitated, her gaze shifting briefly to Lawson before returning to Sierra. "There are some unusual aspects to this case I need to discuss with you privately." Sierra nodded, understanding immediately. The neural implants had been discovered during treatment. "We can use my office," the doctor continued, gesturing toward a door off the main waiting area. Sierra turned to Lawson. "Wait here." It wasn't a request. Lawson's expression remained unreadable, but he nodded once in acknowledgement. Once inside the small but well-organized office, Dr. Velasquez closed the door and motioned for Sierra to sit. Instead of taking her own seat behind the desk, the doctor pulled a chair to position herself directly across from Sierra, a deliberate choice that suggested the seriousness of the conversation to follow. "I need to be direct, Ranger Blackwood," she began, her voice lowered despite the privacy of the office. "The dog you brought in has extensive artificial neural implants integrated with his brain and central nervous system. I've never seen anything like it, and frankly it's well beyond standard veterinary medicine." Sierra nodded, having anticipated this discovery. "I understand, Doctor. Phantom is a military working dog from a specialized program. The implants are classified technology." "That may be, but they're currently causing significant medical complications. The integration points are inflamed, and there appears to be some form of power management issue causing metabolic distress. Without specific knowledge of how the system functions, we're limited in how effectively we can treat him." Sierra processed this information with growing concern. What are his chances? Dr. Velasquez's professional demeanor softened slightly. If he were a standard canine, I'd be cautiously optimistic given his response to initial treatment. But these implants introduce variables I can't predict. They're drawing resources his body needs for healing, yet attempting to remove them would likely cause catastrophic neurological damage. The man who accompanied me, Lawson, has knowledge of the technology, Sierra said carefully. He was able to implement emergency protocols during transport that helped stabilize Phantom's condition. The doctor considered this. I'd normally be extremely hesitant to allow a non-medical person to intervene in treatment, but this is clearly beyond conventional veterinary medicine. If he has specific expertise regarding these implants, his input could be valuable, under strict supervision, of course. Sierra made her decision. Let me speak with him first. There are security considerations involved. With a nod of understanding, Dr. Velasquez left to check on her patient, promising to return shortly. Sierra took a moment to collect her thoughts before rejoining Lawson in the waiting area. The situation was growing increasingly complex. Phantom's survival now depended on specialized knowledge that only Lawson possessed, giving him leverage she hadn't anticipated. When she returned to the waiting area, Lawson looked up with a question in his eyes. They've discovered the implants, Sierra stated simply. Phantom's stabilized but still critical. The doctor says the technology is complicating his treatment. Lawson nodded, unsurprised. The implants weren't designed for extended operational isolation. They require periodic maintenance and specific nutritional support to function properly. Without it, they create increasing biological stress. Can you help? Sierra asked directly. Yes, he replied without hesitation. But there are implications you need to understand first. He glanced meaningfully at the security officers, standing nearby, privately. Sierra considered this request, weighing the risks against Phantom's urgent medical needs. After a moment's deliberation, she approached the security officers. I need 5 minutes of confidential conversation with the subject regarding the canine's specialized medical requirements, she explained. Maintain visual but not audio surveillance. The senior officer frowned slightly, but nodded. 5 minutes, Ranger. We'll be watching. Sierra led Lawson to a quiet corner of the waiting area, positioning themselves where the officers could observe them but wouldn't overhear their conversation. Talk quickly, she instructed. Lawson leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. I can implement protocols that will place the implants in extended dormancy mode, essentially a technological hibernation that will minimize their drain on his biological systems. This will give his body the resources needed to heal. What's stopping you from doing this immediately? 2 things, Lawson replied. First, dormancy mode will temporarily render the data contained in the neural storage inaccessible. Second, and more importantly, initiating this protocol requires director-level authorization codes, which I possess, but using them will immediately alert certain parties that I've accessed the system. Sierra processed the implications. You're saying it will reveal your location to whoever is behind this operation? Yes. The moment I input those codes, a notification will be transmitted through the implant's emergency backup communication system. It can't be blocked or intercepted. You've had these codes all along, Sierra observed, studying him with new suspicion. You could have helped Phantom immediately after we found him. Why didn't you? Lawson met her gaze directly. Because my original orders were to recover both Phantom and the drive. or ensure neither survived if recovery wasn't possible. It was only after observing your interaction with him and recognizing that something about this situation didn't align with my understanding of the program that I began questioning those orders. The candid admission heightened Sierra's wariness rather than alleviating it. And now? What are your objectives now? To understand what's happening, Lawson replied with what appeared to be genuine frustration. I dedicated 3 years to the Cerebral Canine Initiative. I believed in its potential to save lives, both military and civilian. Then suddenly I'm pulled from my position, handed elimination orders, and fed a story about Captain Mercer going rogue that contradicts everything I knew about him. He shook his head slightly. Something isn't right, and I suspect whatever Phantom is carrying will explain it. Sierra studied him carefully, trying to discern truth from manipulation. His explanation aligned with his actions since their confrontation. At the ranger station, helping Phantom when it wasn't necessary for his own survival, sharing information that gave Sierra tactical advantages, demonstrating genuine concern for the dog's condition. If you use those codes, how quickly would they be able to locate us? The transmission is instantaneous, but mobilizing a response team would take time. Given what we've already seen, I'd estimate 2 to 3 hours before they could have operatives at this location. Sierra checked her watch, making rapid calculations. That's enough time to stabilize Phantom and relocate if necessary. She made her decision. Do it. Help him. But understand this, if you're playing a deeper game, if you endanger him or anyone else at this facility, there won't be a place remote enough for you to hide from me. Something like respect flickered in Lawson's eyes. Understood, Ranger. Blackwood. They returned to the main area where Dr. Velasquez had reappeared. After brief introductions and explanations, the doctor reluctantly agreed to allow Lawson access to Phantom under strict supervision. No alterations to our medical treatment, she stipulated firmly. Your intervention is limited solely to the technological components. Lawson agreed to these terms, and they were escorted through the treatment area to a specialized recovery room where Phantom lay on a padded table. The military K9 was connected to multiple monitoring devices, an IV, line delivering fluids and medication, and various sensors attached to key points on his body. Despite the intensive care, his condition remained visibly precarious, his breathing shallow, his powerful body diminished by trauma and deprivation. Sierra felt a surge of emotion at seeing him so vulnerable. This extraordinary animal had endured unspeakable cruelty, fought through impossible odds, and protected her without hesitation, despite his own suffering. Her determination to see him recover and to complete whatever mission had driven him so relentlessly solidified into an unshakable commitment. Dr. Velasquez positioned herself beside the monitoring equipment while Sierra stood near Phantom's head, maintaining both a connection with the dog and a clear view of Lawson's activities. Lawson approached with careful movements, speaking softly to Phantom before touching him. I need to access the primary interface port, he explained to the doctor. It's located at the base of the skull, concealed beneath the fur. With gentle precision, he located the nearly invisible access point and produced a small tool from his pocket, a specialized device approximately the size of a pen. What is that? Sierra asked immediately, her hand moving instinctively toward her weapon. Neural interface key, Lawson explained calmly, standard equipment for program personnel. It's not a weapon or tracking device, just a specialized tool for accessing the implant system. After receiving Sierra's reluctant nod, Lawson carefully inserted the device into the concealed port. A tiny light at the end of the tool illuminated, and he began entering a complex sequence of commands. through what appeared to be touch-sensitive controls on its surface. "I'm initiating authentication protocols," he narrated as he worked. "Once verified, I can implement the dormancy mode that will reduce the implant's drain on his biological resources by approximately 90%. The process took several minutes, during which the monitors showed no significant changes in Phantom's condition. When Lawson finally removed the interface key, the only immediate indication of success was a subtle relaxation in the dog's breathing pattern. "It's done," he confirmed. "The implants will maintain minimal functionality to preserve data integrity and core life support, but all enhanced cognitive functions and non-essential systems are now dormant." Dr. Velasquez studied the monitors with professional focus. His metabolic indicators are already showing improvement. Heart rate stabilizing, oxygen saturation increasing. She sounded cautiously optimistic. If this trend continues, his prognosis improves significantly. Sierra felt a profound relief wash through her, tempered by the knowledge that they now faced a new countdown. Somewhere, an alert had been triggered that would soon bring dangerous adversaries to their location. "Doctor, how soon can Phantom be moved?" she asked. Dr. Velasquez frowned. "Moved? He shouldn't be transported for at least 24-48 hours. He needs continuous monitoring and care." "We don't have that luxury," Sierra replied, glancing at Lawson for confirmation. "The people who did this to him will be coming, and they'll be here within hours." The doctor's expression shifted from professional concern to alarm. "What exactly have I become involved in, Ranger Blackwood?" Sierra considered how much to reveal, balancing the need for cooperation against security concerns. "Phantom is carrying classified information that certain people are willing to kill for. They've already tried to eliminate him once, and they'll make another attempt when they discover his location." Dr. Velasquez absorbed this with remarkable composure. "I understand, but my primary concern remains my patient's medical welfare. Moving him prematurely could reverse the progress we've made." "What if we brought the necessary medical equipment with us?" Sierra proposed. "A mobile intensive care setup that could maintain his treatment during transport and at a secure location." The doctor considered this. Technically possible, but it would require specialized equipment and ideally a veterinary professional to monitor his condition. "Could you recommend someone discreet who might be willing to help? Someone you trust completely?" Dr. Velasquez hesitated, then nodded slowly. "My resident, Dr. Chen. Excellent clinician, unflappable under pressure. If I explain the situation, I believe she would volunteer." "Make the arrangements," Sierra decided. "We need to be ready to move within 2 hours." While Dr. Velasquez went to speak with her colleague and organize the necessary equipment, Sierra pulled Lawson aside. "We need a secure location, somewhere off the grid, where we can continue Phantom's treatment while determining our next steps." Lawson thought for a moment. "When will the security team arrive with the contractors?" "We captured. They should be at the Regional Forest Service headquarters by now for processing and interrogation," Sierra replied. "Then we need to speak with them before we relocate," Lawson said decisively. "Those contractors will have information about who they're working for, authentication protocols, communication channels, extraction procedures, intelligence that could help us understand who we're dealing with and what resources they can bring to bear." Sierra recognized the strategic value of this suggestion, though she remained wary of Lawson's motivations. "I'll arrange for direct questioning, but Phantom doesn't leave my sight, and his medical care remains the priority." "Agreed," Lawson nodded. "There's one more thing we should consider." He reached into his pocket and produced a small device that Sierra immediately recognized, the signal jammer they had confiscated from him at the ranger station. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.